All right, so now let's just talk a little bit about some of the early socialist responses and then the later ones to Mises. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so the earlier ones came from German economists. This didn't get into the English language, Mises' argument, until the 1930s. So through the 1920s, he was being attacked by German economists. And he gave sort of, they gave 4 arguments, very naive, one might say stupid. One was, well, we can calculate in kind. Otto Neurath, who was a big socialist, made the argument that we can, why do we need money for accounting? We can add up apples and oranges. I mean, he didn't know basic arithmetic, okay? And he was actually taken seriously and still is, okay? So that's ridiculous. Calculating in kind, that is entering how many hours of this kind of labor, how many acres of land, how many square feet of factory space you're using. That's not a basis for accounting. There's no common denominator. Okay, so Mises already answered that in his original article. Some of the Marxists said, well, you know, we can calculate with labor hours. Okay, labor hours are homogeneous, right? They're common. We can use them as a common denominator. But there, Mises pointed out that, first of all, labor itself is heterogeneous. Okay? So, for example, is someone like LeBron James, is 2 hours of his time on the basketball court equal to the 12th man on the bench, even within the same industry? They're heterogeneous hours. How do you compare them? Okay? The quality of his skills are much higher the quality of some guy who's been in the league for 12 years and plays 2 minutes a game. Oh, but then, of course, what about comparing that of a brain surgeon to a cashier at McDonald's? Right? They're not the same. Okay? So they're heterogeneous. They're not like one unit of money is compared to another unit of money. Mises also pointed out in that case, how do you value the capital goods and the land? Okay? You're only valuing the labor by adding the labor hours up, but land and capital goods are scarce. Right? And thirdly, even if you have 2 laborers that are exactly the same, guess what? A laborer working on a tractor with the same skills as another guy working with a horse-drawn plow, who's going to produce more wheat or more hay in a day? The guy with the tractor. So in other words, even with the same labor skill, you still need to figure out what the capital is worth that he's using. Okay? So Mises smashed that argument. Again, that was really in his first article. Then the point I brought up before, assume a stationary economy. Okay, so some socialists would say, look, what we're going to do is the same thing that you've been doing. So on the first day of socialism, what we'll do is we'll get rid of competition, but we'll keep the firms and so on. We'll tell everybody to run the firms exactly as you did yesterday, the last day under capitalism. We'll keep the same managers, same workers, and the same jobs. We'll do better than capitalism. We'll just stop advertising, because that's wasteful. We'll stop some of the wasteful practices of capitalism. We'll produce more. Okay? We'll just do the same things capitalism can do. But of course, that's absurd, right? I mean, because then those aren't real people. That's an anthill. You just do the same things over and over again. In the real world, people's tastes change, the technology changes, progresses, some resources are depleted, new resources are found, natural resources are found. You need continual changes in prices that give profits and losses. Let's say you have less oil and gas, so you now need to produce different kinds of vehicles. Your capital goods are wearing out, and people's values are changing. So you have to decide, this train is worn out. Should I produce another train, just like I did a few years ago into capitalism? Or should I produce more airplanes with those resources? Or vice versa, if jet fuel becomes very high. Should I put in a high-speed train? You can't answer that with a stationary economy. Once you introduce change that you have in the real world, this becomes nonsensical. And then calculation using utility. Somehow figure out how much satisfaction individuals get from different goods. But as I said, what the hell is a util? How can you figure out a quantity of utility? It's an intensive magnitude. It's not extensive. Okay, you can't see it in the real world. the objective world. The subjective world is also real, right? Subjective world, someone says, oh, that's all subjective. Well, it's the subjective world that runs the objective world. It's our expectations, plans, and values that run the objective world. But yet, we need an index, a common denominator in the objective world to reflect our values, and those are prices, and that's what you don't have here. You can't just deal with utility. Okay. So that's pretty much, he smashed all of those arguments. They were stupid anyway. Then you got much more sophisticated criticisms of Mises by British economists who were trained in economics. They were neoclassical economists, and there were some Americans involved. And the first was the trial and error method. And basically what these economists said was, you know, what we could do is we can take certain prices. Just we'll have the ghost plan set the prices, and then one and three are similar. One and two are very similar. So I'm not going to. So basically, in both of those, they basically say what we'll do is we'll set arbitrary prices. We'll set up the firms, and then we'll set a certain price for tablet computers, a certain price for automobiles, and on the other hand, we'll set prices for the inputs arbitrarily. Now, the prices will be wrong, and there'll be shortages and surpluses. But when there's a surplus, we know that the price has to be lowered. Okay, so we have a trial and error. And if there's a shortage, we know that the price of the good has to be raised. Right? And now, that was one. The other was, well, we could have a mathematical solution. If we'll get information about everybody's value scales, okay, how everybody values different things. We'll get information about all the available resources, and we'll get technical information. We can combine this information into a whole huge system of equations of supply and demand, and then when we solve these equations, we'll get these shadow prices and we'll get these quantities. We'll get the exact price and quantity that capitalism would get. Okay? In fact, they'll be more accurate because they're mathematical and so on and so forth. Now, there was a couple of the people who were involved in this were Oskar Lange, a Polish economist who was educated in England, and then there was Abel Lerner, a British economist who actually was a Hayekian for a while, and then an American economist named Fred Taylor. Okay, so Hayek responded, and so did another British economist who worked with Hayek, Lord Robbins. They basically said two things. First of all, regarding a mathematical solution, by the time you collect, if you can collect all that information, and it's dispersed, by the time you collect all of that information, it will be already outdated. And back in the 30s, when they were responding, there isn't a computer powerful enough. I mean, they really just had mechanical things. They didn't have electronic computers. We can't solve it. It takes such a long time to solve these equations by hand that there would be no way that it would be an efficient solution. But notice they're admitting that you could get some kind of a solution. It wouldn't be sufficient. It wouldn't be efficient, but it would be possible. And then with the mathematical solution, with the market socialism, Hayek said, well, okay, you could sort of do this. You can change the prices if there's surpluses or shortages, but the market does it at every minute or every hour. How frequently can planners change prices throughout the whole economy? Every month, every 2 months? So the prices aren't going to be the right prices that you're using. And also it's going to be very difficult to get all the dispersed information that you need to change these prices. To make a long story short, he once again admitted its possibility, right? But said it would be extremely inefficient. Now, Mises had a different, and I'll go through this quickly, very different response to all this stuff. First, the mathematical solution, Mises said, if today there's socialism, and the planner knows everybody's value scales, or even substitutes his own, decides what he thinks is best for people, and gets all the engineers and scientists into the same room to give them all the information about production functions, that is technology, and he has people out there who tell him all of the different kinds and numbers, quantities of the factors of production, he still couldn't get the right answer. Even if he put it in a computer, even if he had modern day computers and solved it, okay? The reason is When you stop capitalism and you go into socialism, you have all these capital goods that were produced 20 years ago, 40 years ago, airplanes, last for 20, 40 years. When they wear out, since things keep changing, okay, tastes keep changing, and technology keeps changing, should you replace it with the exact same airplane? Well, you can only know whether you should or not with profits and losses. And a system of equations doesn't give you any profits and losses. It gives you exact prices and quantities in equilibrium. That is, meaning in an economy that's completely static. So no matter, you can change the amount of labor, you can change the amount of land, whatever it is, you'll never get prices and costs, okay? Which means you'll never get profits and losses. So what Mises says, it's not, you can't jump to the efficient state, okay? You're here, it takes years and years and years to change all of the resources, to change all the different kinds of capital goods you have, because you're always making mistakes. Entrepreneurs are always making mistakes about them, right? So he said, and even if you knew what the end product was, you still have all of this stuff that you have to use now, okay? Even if you know that you should have many more airplanes and fewer trains today, how do you still have a lot of trains and fewer airplanes. How do you change them over time most efficiently so that you use resources in the most cost-efficient way, all right? You don't know that without profits and losses. And in this system, there are no profits and losses, okay, with the mathematical solution. And then finally, market socialism. Mises made a great point here. He said, okay, this looks on the economy as run by managers. Each manager is told to look on the prices as given. They can't change prices. They just have to react to the prices. Prices of their products, prices of the factors of production. And then they have to compute their costs and sell at that price if it's profitable. But the point is, capitalism is much more than that. Capitalism is much more than, on an everyday basis, having managers make decisions about what to produce. Capitalism is about destroying some firms that are inefficient or entire industries, getting rid of the typewriter industry, okay? Getting rid of the, let's say, eventually the non-smartphone industry, getting rid of, back in the old days, getting rid of all the horses and buggies that are being built, and shifting the whole industry into automobiles. Once you admit that, then it's the people that control the stock market and other financial intermediaries where money's invested, okay? You just can't give rules to managers. That Mises called that playing market. People are just playing games. Those aren't real prices. The people that really control production are the investor entrepreneurs, okay? So no socialist has ever said that we should still have a stock market, we should still have private banks. That's what you would need, okay? Under socialism, you would have one huge company, one huge collective controlling the capital, okay, deciding which firm should be bigger, which firm should be smaller. They themselves don't have any prices to react to. So the point is, you need all the prices on the stock market, on the financial markets, bond market, and so on, right? You don't get that under market socialism. They just believe it's, well, these managers, they see these prices, and we'll just tell them to react, to keep the costs low, and to produce goods right up to the point where the last good produced is equal to its marginal cost.